All right, today we're starting the new unit, anatomy unit, and it's anatomy and physiology, A&P, and we'll start talking about the levels of organization of any kind of animal body. We'll generally talking about animals, and then we'll talk about the different tissues, how the tissues combine together into the organs, then organs creating systems, and from now on we'll start talking about the different systems. So basically each lecture will cover, like next lecture will cover digestive system and so on and so forth, and I'll show you some of the images of the systems, major systems, today or tomorrow. Well, not tomorrow, next lecture. And we'll have to skip several of those. I understand that it's all of them are important, but don't really have much of time. So anyway, without further ado, let's kind of go into the level of organizations. We already talked about the level of organization of matter. In Bio 1, we started with atoms combining together, creating molecules. Molecules combining together will get the larger molecules, macromolecules, right? And then we'll ended up with macromolecules like proteins and carbohydrates combined together will give you the organelles. And the first level of living creatures are cells. In order to consider to be alive, you have to be made at least out of one cell. That's the reason why viruses, for example, and we all heard about COVID-19, right, lately, a coronavirus is not technically considered to be an alive because it's not made out of cells. It's made out of macromolecules, nucleic acids, RNA-based virus, and then the protein capsule, simplified speaking. But in this particular case, it's not, it's kind of on the brink. It has, it shows some of the living functions or functions of the living creature, and then of course non-living. So, but technically right now we're talking about the level of life is cells. Cells, especially in multicellular organisms, start specializing, so they start doing different functions. For the cells, we start talking about different tissues. Different tissues combined and working together will create an organ or several organs. And then the several organs working on the same function will create an organ systems, and then combination of organ systems will give the organism. And that's an organizational group or organizational level of the organism. Then several organisms of the same species within the same area will create the population, then and so on and so forth, right? We talk about that, don't really have to discuss much right now, but in this particular case we are looking today, we'll generally be talking about the tissues. So and human, in this particular case, we have a different cell types. Humans have about 200 or so different types of cells, and we're talking about trillions of cells overall, right? So in this particular case, very important, tissues are groups of cells which have a similar structure and function. Basically, because they have a similar function, they have a similar structure. All right. And of course, we already talked about the three major embryonic tissues, germ layers, endosome, meso, and ectoderm. We already discussed that when we were talking about the animals, right? So in all of those particular embryonic tissues will give us all of those four major types of the tissue in adult organism. And they're going as epithelial tissues, and there is several different types. There is a connective tissue. There is several different types of the connective tissue. There is muscles. There is three major types of the muscles, and there is a nerve tissue. So this is four major types of the tissues, and in the next lab you will see the different examples of each one of those particular groups. Make sure you know those particular groups. It will be on the lab practical. It will be on the upcoming test number 4. All right. So moving on to the next level, yes, organs, combination of different tissues. Again, they are working on the same function. As a result, they will have a very specific structure, like a stomach or like an eye or anything like that. And then all of those particular organs which are working on the same or generally same function will be combined into the organ systems. Groups of organs working together on the major activities like digestive system or skeletal system. Different bones combined together, creating the protection as well as helping with the movement. So that's the function. All of those particular parts will form the skeletal system. So vertebrate body, and we are an example of vertebrates. Quite often I will be referring to the human being because it's very easy to visualize, more or less. More or less we know our bodies. Plus, if you really like that particular topic, we have a wonderful team of professors in the South Campus. I'm sure the other campuses have a wonderful team of the professors as well, but I specifically know we have a really good team of anatomy and physiology professors. So you might want to go there, especially if you're going like nursing or any kind of biology related part, pre-med, you might want to take anatomy 1 and anatomy 2. So a vertebrate body contains 11 principal organ systems. We will cover about half of those particular systems, well, a little bit over than half. We'll talk about the digestive system, we'll talk about excretory system, circulatory system, respiratory system, we'll talk about the nervous system, and we'll talk about the reproductive system. I think that's it. We'll skip integumentary system, skeletal and muscular system. We'll skip the lymph system, well, immune system, something else. Well, we'll see. So anyway, but we'll talk about some of those particular things I'll mention. So in this particular case, we have a cardiac muscle, a very specialized type of the muscle, which will be found in the heart. Several of them will create a cardiac tissue, a cardiac muscle tissue, right? And then all of them together creating a particular organ, a pump in the human body or in the vertebrate body, a pump which is pumping blood through the circulatory system, right? So now we are start talking about the whole circulatory system with all the veins, arteries, capillaries, and we'll discuss that. The largest one, aorta, the largest one, vena cava, and so on and so forth. We'll discuss that a little bit later on. We'll not go into deep details about the names of the different blood vessels. That's the human anatomy and physiology. I'll just go over the overview of that. So first type of tissues today, we'll talk about epithelial. Epithelial, epi means on top. It's basically the epithelial tissue is the covering tissue. Skin is made out of epithelial tissue, but it's not only the covering of many of the internal organs. All right. So in this particular case, epithelial tissue covers the surfaces, inside and outside. And therefore, it can come out of any of those 3 germ layers. We're talking about there is epithelial tissue, comes from epidermis, right? Well, from the ectoderm, the epidermis, for example. And then there is the lining up of our body cavity, which made out of mesoderm, the lining up of at least part of our digestive tract made out of endoderm. So as you can see, it has a variety from the, well, quite diverse origins. Now, here's a very important part. Epithelial tissue, some of them will form glands. Today we'll talk about two types of the glands. Those particular two types will be as a short answer on the test and most likely on the lab practical. So please, please, I'm begging you right now, make sure that you understand what's the exocrine and endocrine glands, and I'll talk about it momentarily, and the specific examples. And I'll give you the main issues students have whenever they're giving me the definitions. All right, so the cells of epithelial tissue tightly bond together. They are covering, they're providing a protective barrier from any kind, like for example here, why we have a protective barrier. So the water will not escape, so the bacteria or any other invaders will not get inside, chemicals, etc. So they are providing a protective barrier. In digestive system, epithelial tissue is lining up the digestive tract, so let's say hydrochloric acid will not start destroying the stomach. We do have a hydrochloric acid, and there is a special lining of the cells which producing specific mucus, which protects our cells from being destroyed by the hydrochloric acid, and so on and so forth. We'll discuss that a little bit more. So characteristics, very, very important. Epithelial tissue will be attached to the underlying connective tissue. So we have epithelial tissue, and underneath there will be a connective tissue. So in this particular case, basal and apical surfaces. So any kind of epithelial tissue will have the apical surface, the top side. See, this is the apical surface of my skin, which is a part of the epithelial tissues, right? And then those particular cells, specifically the live cells, will be attached to a basal surface. This is where the epithelial tissue attaches to underlying tissues, specifically connective tissues. All right. That particular polarity is extremely important to the function. Again, looking at the skin, the cells which are attached to the basal surface are alive in the skin. The cells which are surfacing the apical surface already dead. We covered by the dead skin cells, and that's why we're shading them constantly, right? About 80% of household dust is nothing else but the dead skin cells. Yay! We are shading a lot. We are technically right now, we are in kind of bubble, like my personal bubble, right? What exactly it is? Well, it's a cloud of the shade of skins you have. You constantly shading them. You can say, that's not nice. I agree with you on one hand. On another hand, think about the alternative. If you would not be shading constantly skin cells, what would going to happen? The layers will be thicken, right? You will have a dead skin cells attaching and growing on your apical surface, meaning you will be gaining about a ½ inch of dead skin cells a year. Now, let's say you are at 20, so you have about 10 inches of dead skin hanging, just in addition to 10 inches. But yay much, right? I'm in my 40s, so I would have to like 20 inches of dead skin hanging from me. That would be not a very pretty pictures everywhere. We're talking about everywhere. Yeah, extra 20 inches. No, I rather shave, right? So anyway, this is what we essentially looking at: a basal surface and then the apical surface. A basal surface, and usually it will be attached to something which is known as a basal lamina, and the apical surface. In this particular case, it shows the digestive tract, most likely. It might be something else, but the digestive tract. In this particular case, look at those, something which is known as a microvilli. We'll talk about the microvilli when we'll discuss the digestive system, but still, let's take a look. Those particular kind of invagination of the cell membrane. Why? To drastically increase the surface area. See, Here we have a surface area of the flattened cell is just this. Now, or this, right? Now, if I'll have a microvilli, my surface area is that drastically increase the surface area. Why? To absorb something. What the digestive system absorbs? Nutrients. So in this particular case, please keep in mind that microvilli are drastically increasing the surface area for general absorption. Well, first of all, in the digestive system, they're producing a lot of enzymes, and then they, of course, they absorb what? Nutrients. So in this case, let's go next one. So two general types, simple and stratified. Stratos means layers, so stratified many layers. Simple means one layer thick, just a simple one layer of cells. That's a simple epithelium. Then the stratified will be more than one layer. So two or more layers, that would be a stratified epithelium. Also, in this particular case, depends on the shape and the size of the cells. We might have, like, for example, squamous simple epithelium or cuboidal simple epithelium. Later on in the lab, we'll see the cuboidal simple epithelium in the nephrons or in the cross section of the kidney. No, and then of course column. So squamous cells flattened out, meaning that the height of the cell comparatively to the length of the cell is drastically, the height is lower or smaller than the length of the cell. They flat. Now, cuboidal cells, they're not the perfect cubes, but the height and the length of the cell is about the same. And the columnar cells, the height of the cell and the length of the cells, the height is drastically higher or larger than the length of the cell. They are kind of like columns. So we have a flattened one, then the cuboidal one, and then the columnar one. And in this particular case, we might have a squamous stratified, squamous simple, cuboidal simple, cuboidal stratified, columnar simple, columnar stratified. And then there is something which is known as a pseudo false stratified, and we'll talk a little bit about that, but not too deep. Once again, that's a cytology, the cell about all the science about cells. All right, so simple squamous epithelium lines up lungs as well as the blood capillaries. They are relatively thin, so the oxygen can get into the blood capillaries, carbon dioxide can easily go out. Don't have to travel too much through the cell, because from the oxygen from the lungs, it needs to get where? To our blood. And then the carbon dioxide at the same time have to get out, so they are moving. So smaller the distance, so flattened one, so in this particular case, squamous epithelium, right? Permits the diffusion. And same thing in the blood capillaries. Blood capillaries, oxygen, as well as the nutrients have to travel to the cells, and then any kind of waste have to travel back into the blood, so it will be circulated, and then whatever the waste we have would be excreted, hopefully. Now, simple cuboidal epithelium. So the cells are about the height and the lengths are about the same. So lines up kidney tubules. Later on, we'll talk about the excretory system, and basically any excretory system is the layer of tubes, no small ones, tubules. And then of course several glands, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. Again, today we'll talk about a very specific tube, very specific types of the glands, and exocrine ones. Now, simple columnar epithelium line up the respiratory tract, the upper respiratory tract, like in the trachea and the bronchi. In those particular one, they have a cell, on top of the cells, they have the cilia to move any kind of mucus out. Why we have a mucus in our upper respiratory system? Whenever I'm breathing in, I'm breathing in oxygen, hopefully, right? And some of the carbon dioxide, nitrogen mostly. But also I'm breathing in all the cells I'm shading. I'm most likely breathing some of the bacteria, some of the fungal spores, maybe some viruses, etc. All kinds of junk, right? So that particular junk will be captured by the mucus in my upper respiratory system, and then it will be moved out. If it's in my nasal passages, it will be moved out of my my nose. If it's in the trachea, earlier, well, higher than that, it will go, and then I will swallow it. This is, you might heard that in lifetime, on average, the human will eat like 6 or 7 spiders. Yes, it's not like you're going and start eating spiders. No, tiny little bitty spiders. You're laying down, sleeping, inhaling, and then coughing it out, and then swallowing. Here we go. That's the part. Yes, I know everybody's looking for no spider, yummy. So that's a columnar epithelium. And then, of course, we have a gastrointestinal tract. We'll see that in the lab contain a very specific cells known as the goblet cells, which secrete mucus. Mucus aligning the digestive tract to protect it and also let the food or chyme, partially digested food, slide nicely through the digestive tract. So we'll discuss that a little bit more. So here we go. So you see the squamous cells, the height is much smaller than the overall length. The cuboidal one, the height and the length is about the same. And then the columnar, the height is much larger than the length of the cell. Moving on. Stratified epithelium. 2 or more layers thicker. So like, for example, epidermis, we have a flattened cells, right? And then we also have a keratin. Remember that particular protein which amphibians started to waterproof their skin. We do have a keratin in our skin, and also, of course, the nails, as well as the hair, hooves, horns, etc., is made out of feathers. The scales of the lizards or snakes is made out of keratin. The shell of the tortoises, etc. So keratin. Lips are covered with non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. That's why they can dry up relatively easy. That's why we're using a lip, the chopstick, right, to moisturize our lips. And if you think about it, if you had the chopped lips, it's already not a really good, feeling. I had, well, I'm a photographer in my other life. I think I already told you that. And I traveled several times with friends of mine in high altitude mountains where you have the air is very, very dry. So your lips will chop really, really quickly. And the worst part right here at the corner of your mouth will chopped, and then it will be very, very very painful experience to like open the mouth when you're eating or laughing or anything like that. So yeah. Anyway, so here we have goblet cells. Here we're looking at the cilia. I told you about the movement of the cilia, right? So to capture any kind of gunk, they will have special goblet cells which produce mucus, and that particular mucus will trap any kind of foreign body. So goblet cells is kind of semi-transparent thingy which is producing, it's basically a cell which producing a lot of mucus. So in this case, it says pseudo-stratified. Why it's called the pseudo-stratified? Look, here we have a nucleus on this side, here we have a nucleus a little bit above. So looks like 2 layers, but technically it's a single layer. Therefore, it's a false stratified. You don't really have to worry about that, at least on this particular level of biology. And here we're looking at the stratified layer, like in our cheek, for example, inside of the mouth, you will have Live cells, they kind of started as a cuboidal. As they mature, they start flattening it out, and first 10 or so layers are already dead cells. Now, glands. Two types, exocrine gland and endocrine gland. All right, exo, endo. Some of the students making a huge mistake saying exocrine gland secreting outside, endocrine glands secreting inside. That is wrong. Please don't give me that definition on the exocrine or endocrine glands, because that would be, I will give you 0 for that. And it will be a question on the test. All right. Because, like, let's say my pancreas, or at least part of my pancreas, is exocrine gland. It's secreting digestive enzymes into my intestine. It's not secreting it outside. That would be really not good for me. Same thing, like, for example, my salivary gland, right? You don't see me drooling, secreting my saliva outside. It stays in my mouth and then I swallow it. So exocrine glands is a specific type of the glands which is connected, and they have a duct, meaning the group of cells secreting something, whatever it might be, and then those particular secretion goes through the duct into somewhere. Doesn't really matter. Like sweat will come out outside, yes, but again, my pancreas, that nothing is coming out outside, at least yet. Otherwise, I have a problem. I have a huge medical problem if my pancreas will start secreting something outside. No, it's secreting inside of my digestive enzyme, well, in my digestive system, specifically small intestine. So exocrine glands have the exit duct, while the endocrine glands, they are secreting into the bloodstream directly. They just simply don't have the ducts. Okay, ductless, no ducts. They secreting it into the blood, and those particular secretion will be going through the body, and they will have a special target organs. And we'll talk about the endocrine system later on, because they are producing a special chemical messages known as the hormones. You probably heard about the hormones, right? So once again, I'm pointing it out. Exocrine glands have a duct. Endocrine glands are ductless. This is what I'm looking for whenever you will be answering that particular question. And then I'll say, give me an example at least of 1 or 2 exoendocrine glands. Sweat, sebaceous glands, salivary glands, milk glands, all of those are exocrine glands. Now, pancreas, I already mentioned it. Part of the pancreas is the exocrine gland. It's producing digestive enzyme, and through the duct, they go into the small intestine to help with the digestion. So far, so good. Now, there is an endocrine part of the pancreas as well, meaning that part of the pancreas producing insulin. You heard about that, which goes directly into the blood and regulating the blood sugar levels. What other endocrine glands we might think of? Gonads, testes, ovaries. There is a pituitary gland, right, in the head. We'll talk about that. There is the thyroid gland. There is the adrenaline glands. So those ones would be the example of the endocrine glands. They are submitting secretions, also known as the hormones, directly into the bloodstream. They are ductless. So please make sure you understand that particular definition. So here what we have, and it's talking about the pancreas specifically. Here we have the alpha and beta cells, which producing the secrete hormones such as insulin directly into the bloodstream. On another hand, there is a specific part of the pancreas which is producing the enzymes, which goes into a small intestine and helping with the digestion. Sweat gland would be the exocrine gland, because here we have the secretion, sweat, and later on through the duct it will surface. It will go on the surface of the skin. Same thing, very similar structure we have for salivary glands, the tear glands, all of those ones. All right. Okay, now next group known as the connective tissues. Connective tissues generally made from the mesoderm. Within the connective tissue, we have two general types: the proper connective tissue and specialized connective tissue. With a proper connective tissue, we have a loose or dense connective tissue, and there is a subgroups in there. And then for the specialized connective tissue, cartilage, bone, and blood. Some students saying, well, blood is liquid. I agree with you, it is. But how it can be a tissue? It is a liquid tissue. And well, today we'll talk about something which is known as the extracellular matrix. See right there, extracellular matrix. What does it mean? What matrix means? We have cells which will be embedded or located in the extracellular space, some sort of chemicals. It could be crystalline chemicals, such as in bone. Basically, the cells are embedded in the calcium phosphate or apatite, right? And then there might be some of the proteins surrounding those cells, like in the case of the cartilage. And then there might be a liquid known as the plasma surrounding those cells. Generally, connective tissues have a very large amount of extracellular matrix. Extracellular matrix, stuff outside of the cells. We have cells, and then there is a stuff outside, whatever is stuff making those particular connective tissues. Protein, fibers, liquid, some of the inorganic chemicals, whatever it might be. It doesn't really have to worry about, well, you'll have to worry about what it does, but in this particular case, some of the things like extracellular matrix, ECM, sounds complex. No, it's not. It's just stuff outside. Outside of what? Of cells. All right, well, let's take a look. There is a special cells known as a fibroblast, which will produce extracellular matrix in a loose connective tissue. Cells are scattered, and then the matrix, those particular, let's say, fibers, like the collagen, elastin, etc., they are facing all kinds of directions. All right, they are almost chaotic. Hence the name, loose connective tissues. Strengthened by the protein fibers, but also there is a collagen, elastin, make tissue elastic, means that if you pull it and then it will go back, known as the elastin, right? Everybody's seen the, what's the cartoon name? Incredibles, yes, Incredibles, and then there was an Incredibles 2, whatever. The family of the incredible humans, and then there was Elastic Girl, the female, the mother of the family, right? Elastic Girl, she could stretch and then go back. Technically, it's probably was not elastin. There is a more interesting protein known as a wrestling. Insects have it. Wrestling is the most stretchable material we know of. But if we call her wrestling girl, probably like everybody like, hey, we don't know what wrestling is. That's why I guess they called it the last. So, and then of course there will be a reticulin which supports the network of collagen. Collagen is basically a protein which kind of twisted up a little bit. As a result, it can work as the well, simplified speaking, as the spring, stretching and then it goes back, and then it's stretching again, goes back. That's why we might ended up with some sort of wrinkles or stretch mark whenever you're stretching and it does not give it back. So over a period of time, a long time, if it being stretched, the spring will lose its elasticity, so to speak. So, all right. Now, adipose tissue, a very interesting group. It's a connective tissue. Make sure you understand that. And we'll see them under the microscope in the lab too. But this is how essentially it looks like. We have cells. Adipose tissue don't have much of the extracellular matrix. All right. So, but those particular cells, they will be filled up with the literally fat. Adipose tissue is nothing else but the scientific name for the fat tissue. This is where the organism will store some of the fat for several reasons. In some of the animals, we have stored fat for insulation, right? Thicker fat tissues you have on the skin or under the skin, actually, in the hypodermis, more insulation you have. Some of the marine animals have a very thick layer of that insulating them. Humans versus, let's say, a seal in the Arctic waters, Titanic, right? Think about that. Human in those particular Arctic waters will survive for 10-15 minutes tops. Seals can swim they head off and they will be like just fine with that, not dying from the hypothermia. And also fat, and yes, I know it's a big problem. We in Houston is one of the fattiest cities in the United States. We will talk a little bit more when we'll discuss some of the issues with the digestive system, specifically the malnutrition. It's a part of the malnutrition. But in this particular case, fat is also cushioning some of the internal organs. There is a layer of visceral fat to cushion all organs whenever you're running, whenever you're jumping, whenever you do any kind of exercises, they're not hitting each other. Very important part. So fat has a bad rap, but it's actually not a really bad thing to have. Of course, excess of anything can kill you. Not enough of anything will kill you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. But yeah, healthy part of the fat is important, or healthy amount of fat is important. So adipose tissue is one of those connective tissues. Now, dense connective tissue versus loose connective tissue. Dense connective tissue, it's a similar, it has same extracellular matrix made out of collagen, elastin, etc. But in this particular case, the collagen fibers line up in a particular direction. And the direction is aligned with the force which will be applied to that particular connective tissue. Generally makes tendons and the ligaments. And everybody, of course, knows the difference between the tendons and ligaments. Tendons connect the muscle to the bone, so all of those are tendons. And now the ligaments will connect the bone to the bone. All right, so tendons are the connective tissue connecting bone to the muscle or muscle to the bone. Ligament connect bone to the bone. All right, so collagen fibers might have a different orientation, and yes, there is some of the connective tissue which covers the kidney and muscles and the nerves and the bones, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But so in this particular case, you'll see the elastin, the collagen fibers, right? And in this particular case, they all pointing everywhere. In the dense connective tissue, the collagen fibers are aligned in a very specific orientation. All right. So that's the main difference, and you will see a very similar pictures under the microscope next lab. Cartilage is another very interesting, that's a specialized, of course, connective tissue, firm and flexible, does not really stretch, but very, very great tensile strength. As a result, it found in the joint surfaces where you will have that particular movement or grinding bone against the bone. So the bone will not be grinding against the bone because of the cartilage. Cartilage will have a very specific, in addition to the elastin as well as the collagen fibers, it will have a specific glycoprotein known as a chondrin. And this is the majority of the extracellular matrix of the cartilage. We'll see the cells, and then known as the chondrocytes. Cytos means cell in Greek, chondros means cartilage, so cells producing cartilage, okay? And because they do not stretch much, you can break the cartilage. My nose, or like that, the top part of the nose, well, the bottom part, the top is a bone, and then you can feel the cartilage coming out. See, right? Yeah, my nose are, well, the cartilage part of the nose is broken. Well, was broken. It healed now. Everything is fine. A few years ago, army is a great place to be, right? So anyway, nothing against the army. Interesting part of my life. In Russia, you had to go, well, if you are male, you had to join the army at some point of time, and I was joining for about a year after I graduated my university as the officer. But anyway, in this particular case, cartilage is very important, and in some places or in some cases, the cartilage will be a bone substitution. It started, many of the bones starting as the cartilage, and later on this particular glycoprotein will be replaced by the actual bone tissue. For example, in the newborns, whenever for the newborns to go through the birth canal, there is a part which is a cartilage part, so the on the head, so the bones of the skull can kind of collapse a little bit, close down, come out, and then it will open up. Same thing with the cartilage fish. Remember we were talking about the cartilage fish? Cartilage fish, like sharks and the skates, they have the entire skeleton made out of cartilage, along with the, remember we talked about the jawless fish, the lampreys, those ones, and the hagfish. Their skeleton is also made out of cartilage. So basically the cells, cartilage cells, will be located in the special places known as the lacuna. And they will be producing, they will be secreting those particular cells. Those cells will be secreting those chemicals such as chondrin as well as the collagen fibers outside, creating that semi-solid or basically solid extracellular matrix. But the cells are alive. Same thing with the bone. Despite that the bone is very strong and it has the calcium apatite, well, calcium phosphate in there, it's still, the cells are still alive. So yeah, bone, osteocyte. Osteos means bone, cytos means cells. Bone cells remain alive in a matrix which is hardened with the specific mineral known as the calcium phosphate. Calcium phosphate, also known as the apatite. So in this particular case, despite that the mineral, and then of course there is a collagen there, which is reinforced by the calcium phosphate. Despite that, the cells are alive, and they have a network of tiny little bitty channels. And those particular channels known as the caniculi. And we'll talk about that, and you will see them in the next lab. Now, blood is an extracellular matrix, is made out of liquid known as the plasma, where the blood cells are suspended in, and most of them, of course, are erythrocytes, red blood cells. This is the most numerous cell in your body. The most one of the smallest ones not the smallest, but relatively small, and the most numerous cells in your body, red blood cells, also known as RBCs, red blood cells. Then there is the leukocytes, known as the white blood cells, and we'll see them under the microscope, of course, later on. And those ones, there is several types of the leukocytes, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the lab. And then there is the thrombocytes. Well, they form thrombocytes. They are parts. They started as the cell, and then they break down the cell, literally break down into small pieces of that, those particular pieces known as the platelets. So we have the cellular part of the blood, and then the extracellular or ECM, extracellular matrix of blood. So here what we have, this is the cartilage. As you can see, those dark spots are the cells located in the lacunas, and they producing all that particular pink stuff is the extracellular matrix. All right, now looking at the bone, so what do we see? This is the lacunas where the cells are located. The lines, the dark lines which you see, are the caniculi. That's the small channels. And here is something which known as the central canal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But in this particular case, central canal, this is where usually the blood vessels will be located to feed all of those tiny little bitty cells, and also take any kind of waste from them, because the cells inside of the bone matrix are alive. Okay, and then here we have a red blood cells, and this is what you will see generally under the microscope. The red blood cells are relatively small, bright red, and we'll talk a little bit more about those when we'll discuss the circulatory system. And this is the white blood cells. Actually, under the microscope, they will look purple. And that this people will say, well, why they are purple? I had students like, well, why they didn't call them purple cells? I'm like, well, because if you look under the microscope, those ones are pretty much transparent cells. That's why they called white blood cells comparatively to the red blood cells. But if you add a specific dye, those particular cells, in specifically the nucleus, will look purple, so you can identify those particular cells. As a matter of fact, the adult erythrocytes in mammals, you, me, and dog and a cat, etc., in mammals do not have a nuclei. It's not the prokaryotic cells. I think we discussed that before, but in this particular case, it started the cell which eventually will produce or will mature into a red blood cell initially start with the nucleus, but then it's losing the nucleus because the life of the erythrocyte is about a month or so. So in this particular case, there is no point for the erythrocyte to have a nucleus, so it's losing the nucleus. Yet it does have some of the membrane-bound organelles, mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, all of that are present in the red blood cell. So it is a eukaryotic cell without the nucleus. Let me see if I remember good. Okay. All right. So next group of the cells known as the muscle tissues or muscle cells, and we have the three major types: the smooth, skeletal, and the cardiac. All of them will have a very specific proteins known as the actin and myosin. And actin, the fibers along, will be kind of slightly past the myosin. Whenever the muscle contracts, what happens? Those fibers kind of slide past each other. Okay, just a little bit. They have a tons of those actin myosin complexes. And if you have a lot of those complexes, you will start seeing wherever they're touching each other, and I'm simplifying it, those particular lines. That's known as the striations. So whenever we have a striation, skeletal and cardiac muscle, skeletal specifically have a very distinct striations. Smooth muscles don't have striations because they do have actin myosin complexes, but they're not as strong represented as in skeletal and cardiac muscles. All right. Skeletal muscles are generally considered to be under our voluntarily control. I can, well, those particular, I'm moving my finger because that's the skeletal muscles. I want to move it, I move it. I need to flex my bicep, I can flex my bicep or tricep or whatever. In this particular case, that's considered to be a voluntarily controlled. Most of the muscles, not all of them, and remember, biology is the science about the exception. Most of the skeletal muscles will have two attachments. It will be attached on one side and it will be attached on another side, on two sides, right? This one or that one or what have you. Except one particular muscle, which is known as the tongue. Tongue is attached only on one side, on the back of my on the back of my mouth. It's attached, and the other part that's made out of skeletal muscles. Later on in the lab, we'll see the cross section through the tongue, and hopefully we'll be able to see those particular striations. Okay. While the smooth muscles and the cardiac muscles are generally not under our control. We don't think about like, oh, I'm getting too cold, I need to speed up the movement of my heart so the blood will start circulating faster, right? We don't think about that. It happens in our nervous central part of the nervous system, which is automated or almost fully automated. Yes, there is a special training when you can kind of get and hold and you can speed it up and slow down your cardiac muscle and so on and so forth. But generally, it's not under our voluntarily or known as involuntarily control. Same thing with the our digestive system is aligned with the smooth muscles. Peristaltis, the contraction of the wave of contraction going through the digestive system. We're not thinking like, oh, I need to start contracting so my food or partially digested food will go through the digestive system. We don't do that. We don't think about that. We have a special automated control in our ancient part of the brain. And we'll talk about that a little bit when we discuss the nervous system. Now, smooth muscles found in the blood vessels and visceral organs. What visceral means? Internal organs. Contain a single nucleus, and they're not striated. You don't really see the striations when you're looking under the microscope. And they're not under our voluntarily control. Skeletal muscles usually attached to the bone by the tendons on either side, right? And the contractions causes bones to move, so that we have something which is known as a muscular skeletal system. Muscle fibers, cells multinucleated. They do have those particular striations. We discussed that the actin and myosin filaments. I'll show you the picture in the lab about that. I guess I will need to add it to the lecture as well, but it's basically, again, we have the actin fibers kind of attaching to the myosin fibers, and whenever the contraction occurs, the overall length of that particular unit decreases. So cardiac muscles, it's kind of a mix between the smooth muscles and the skeletal muscles. Not exactly the same, but interconnected cells have a single nucleus such as the smooth muscles, but they do have the striations as the skeletal muscles. The interconnections between two cells known as the intercalated discs, and you will see them under the microscope. I'll show it to you during the next on Thursday. Well, yeah, during the next lab. All right. So the cardiac muscles form a single functional unit. They can transmit that particular contraction. As a result, the heart for some time can contract on its own. You might heard about that, let's say in Yucatan Peninsula, the Aztecs, for example, the native Indian tribes which lived there, they were performing human sacrifices, and they would take the heart out, and it will continue to contract for some time, right? And they build those pyramids. And I don't know if you can still to climb one of those particular. There's one pyramid which you used to be able to climb. And you're going up with the right on top of the pyramid. There is kind of rock squarish, and this is where the human sacrifices apparently has been done. Anyway, so let's kind of take a look. Smooth muscles. You can see the fibers located next to each other, single nuclei, don't really see the striations. Here you can clearly see the striations. See, right there. Many nuclei, but you can clearly see the striations. And in this, in the cardiac muscles, you can see some of the striations. It's not as pronounced as in the skeletal muscles. So let's say for the lab practical sake, if you'll see the muscular, the muscle tissue without the striations, you're looking at the smooth muscles. If you'll see the striations, a very distinct striations, you most likely will be looking at the skeletal muscles. I'll try not to put the cardiac muscle because it's, first of all, striations are much fainter. But now you can start seeing those particular lines. You see the dark lines right here, the dark line right here, dark line right there. Those are intercalated discs. This is basically the disc where one cell attaches to another one. And then, of course, you'll find it in the heart. Oh yeah, and here we have a picture. If you'll later on in advanced physiology classes, you might be have a fresh killed frog, and if you open the cavity, remove the heart, especially in a saline solution where with a little bit of glucose, will continue to contract for some time with no connection to the nervous system. And later on we'll talk about why exactly is happening when we'll discuss the circulatory system. So nerve tissue. Yeah, I have about 10 minutes, so let's go with the nerve tissue. Nerve tissue will be made out of neurons. Neuron is basically the functional unit of the nerve tissue and also supporting cells. The neurons will be sending the signals, right? Only one way, and we'll talk about that today. And then there will be a supporting cells, which helps the neuron to do whatever the function it does. And also it's insulating, so in some cases it helps with the speeding up the transmission of the signal, and we'll talk about that. Generally, neurons will have three major parts. Look at my hand right there. The short projections and numerous short projections, right? Numerous short projections known as the dendrites. Those particular dendrites, they are on the receiving end. This is where they're receiving the nervous signals. From where? From other neurons or from the sensors. Then the signals going and they will get integrated in the cell body. That's the part of the central part of the neuron, which contain nucleus and most of the organelles. And then the signal will continue to go into a long, less branch, not as like as the dendrites, single extension. It will be just a branch further down, and then it will be either attached to the effector, a muscle of some sort, for example, or it will be attached to the dendrites of another neuron. So the cell signal or the nervous signal goes from the dendrites into the cell body through the axon, conducts impulses away from the cell body. That's important, the axon, right? Then the supporting cells known as the neuroglia, do not conduct any electrical impulses, but they helping the neuron. And also in some cases, whenever they wrap, they're creating those particular gaps, and I'll show you the picture momentarily. Those ones are nodes on the Ranvier. So the signal is not traveling through the axon, it's kind of jumping between those particular cells. As a result, acceleration of the impulses instead of 1 meters per second can go up to like 150 meters per second. So here's what we have. Again, we're looking at the neuron. Neuron has a short branched out projections known as the dendrites. Dendrites on the receiving end of the signal, nervous signal. Where it coming from? Again, from another neurons or from the sensors. Internal, external, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we'll discuss the nervous system. So the signals coming in will get integrated in the cell body, and then they will be sent out by the, well, through the axon, and then the end of the axon known as the endings, the terminals, axon terminals, will be either attached to the effector, and in this particular case, that's a muscle, and this is what makes the muscle, for example, contract or relax, generally contract. So in this particular case, or it will be the dendrites of another neuron. Okay, now those particular kind of bluish looking cells, this is the neuroglia cells. Okay, also known as the Schwann cells. Schwann was one of the fathers of the cell theory. We talk about that in Bio 1, or you're supposed to talk it with your instructor in Bio 1. And he also discovered the cells which literally wrapping up the longer extension known as the axon. There is it's also known as a myelin shield. You probably heard about that. So myelin shield cells, they're literally wrapping around the axon, protecting it, and also creating a very important part, those particular gaps. Those gaps are known as a Ranvier nodes, so Ranvier gaps. This is the, again, named after a gentleman who discovered them. But the signal can either go slower through the whole axon at the speed about 1 meter per second or 1 yard per second, or the repolarization happens there and then it jumps, and the repolarization happens there and then it jumps, and then it jumps, and then it jumps, and then it jumps, and so on. So in this particular case, jumping of the signal is much faster. And then, of course, this is speeding up the signal. So the signal can go and reach whatever the effector it has faster. Very important part of that. So nervous system will be subdivided into two major groups known as the central nervous system, essentially brain and the nerve or spinal cord. And then the peripheral nervous system, CNS and PNS. So the central nervous system, integration and interpretation of the input. Remember, I was talking about the brain, that too many sensors will require a lot of interpretation. The cells which will have to integrate, figure it out what's going on, and they interpret the input. Like, for example, yellow color. Everybody see the yellow colors right here? Division of the nervous system written in yellow. Do we have a sensors detecting the yellow color directly in our eyes? No, we don't. We have a red, green, and blue sensors, right? Red, green, and blue. No yellow. Yet we can see yellow. How? Our brain interpreting it. It's a fiction of our imagination, essentially. Not as simple as that, but the yellow is made up color. Made up by which part? By our visual cortex of the brain. So central nervous system accepting the signals and interpreting them. And we'll talk a little bit more about yellow when we'll discuss the nervous system, specifically the eyes. Now, peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system, if it's not a brain or the spinal cord, it's known as a peripheral nervous system. They are communicating the signals. They are receiving the signals from where? From the internal or external sensors, and they're sending it to the central nervous system to integrate and interpret whatever the signal is. And then they also sending the response after the interpretation occurs. Then we have some sort of the response. And in this particular case, so communication of the signal to the rest of the body. You grab a hot skillet, your sensors, the temperature sensors say, hey, there is a very hot skillet right there. You need to release it. Or you grab it and there is a dog right there. And like, if I'll release it, it will hit the dog and then the dog will get burned. So like, I'll override it and I'll put it right there, even though my hand is burning. So this, all of that is basically a communication, then the interpretation of whatever inputs you have. So communication and integration, three organ systems, not one, not two, but three different ones, which will connect and coordinate the responses. Nervous system, we already talked about that. Sensory system and the endocrine system. Sensory system is basically a system of all of the sensors in our body, internal and external as well. We have the internal sensors, which measuring the amount of oxygen, the temperature inside of our body. Endocrine system and nervous system is two systems which are communicative systems. They are sending the signals out. The nervous system sending the electrochemical signals, while the endocrine system sending only chemical signals. Nervous system, the electrochemical is much faster response. Endocrine system, slower response, but usually quite often it will take a very long time for that particular response to go on. Make sense? Anyway, support and movement, musculoskeletal system, two interrelated organ systems. We're talking about muscular system as well as the skeletal. That one we will kind of skip. We'll talk a little bit about that in the lab, and that would be the most of the stuff we will be talking in the lab. That would be it. Then we have a regulation and maintenance. Now, 4 organ systems talking about the maintaining the body chemistry. Digestive, to get the chemicals in. Circulatory, to circulate them around. Respiratory, another to get one major chemical in, oxygen, and get carbon dioxide out. And urinary system to get any waste out. The defense system, of course, would be the immune system, and then, of course, integumentary system. We will not talk much about those particular systems during this part of the biology. And then there is a continuity of any kind of vertebrates or invertebrates. We're talking about the reproduction. And really quickly, this is the systems, the nervous system, we'll talk about that. Endocrine system, we'll talk about those ones as well. Skeletal system, we briefly discussed that in the lab, and that would be it. Muscular system, same thing as the skeletal system. Briefly discuss that in the lab, and that would be it. We'll have a separate lecture on digestive system, I think next one, and then we'll talk about the circulatory system, respiratory system, excretory system. We will skip the integumentary system completely. We'll discuss a little bit of the integumentary system, the structure of the skin, when we'll discuss the nervous system in the lab. Lymphatic or immune system, we'll skip almost for the entirety. We'll talk a little bit briefly about the lymph nodes or lymphatic vessels returning the liquid back into the circulatory system when we'll talk about the circulatory system, but we'll not talk much about that. We'll discuss the reproductive system, males and females overall. And we are done for today. So let me stop with the recording.